This is the awkwardness you were talking about, Lydia, where we just sit here in silence and like wait for people to come into Zoom.
I love it. Now everyone else understands the awkwardness.
Exactly.
Plus,
all right, cool.
I can fill some air. I love Christie. I love
All right, we'll let people, I know people like to come in their own, so we'll go ahead and get started and people can join us when they sign in. But hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Kerfoot, the Deputy Director of Events at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping items before we begin. So first, and very importantly, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for where you can purchase a copy of Groups straight from PNP's website. And if you live in the DC area and you don't feel like waiting for shipping, you can actually select in-store pickup and you can grab your copy from any of our 3 store locations, Union Market, The Wharf, and one in Northwest on Connecticut Avenue. You can also ask our author a question tonight by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we just ask that you put the questions in that spot rather than the chat, just because it keeps it all together so that Lydia can access them easily. But you can drop your question at any time during the event. All right, it is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Christie Tate is the author of tonight's book, Group: How One Therapist and a Circle of Strangers Saved My Life, a memoir that recounts her time in a psychotherapy group. Readers are given a front row seat to the painful but hilarious journey that is group therapy, an underexplored process that breaks you down but then reassembles you so that all the pieces finally fit together. Moderating tonight's conversation is Lidia Yuknavitch, a nationally best-selling author of the novels The Book of Joan, The Small Backs of Children, and Dora, A Head Case, along with the memoir, The Chronology of Water. Most recently, she published the story collection Verge, which I will also drop a link for you in the chat because that book is brilliant. So please help me welcome Lydia and Christie to PNP Live. Hey guys.
Yay! Thank you, Beverly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, it is my deepest pleasure and honor to be here with you, Christie. I am filled with admiration and respect and pee-pee glee, as you know I am. And so we're thinking maybe Christie will read a little bit first before we start chatting, or at least I hope she will. So do you have a part you will consider reading, Christie?
Sure, that sounds great. Thanks, Lydia. Thank you, Beverly. And thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'm just going to read like an opening scene. This is when I first meet Dr. Rosen in the waiting room. And I go back to his office. This is for my very first, before group starts, you have to be screened, I suppose, for psychosis or whatever. And this is that opening scene. I found Dr. Rosen's number in the phone book and left a message on his machine 2 hours after my dinner with Marnie. He called me back the next day. Our conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. I asked for an appointment. He offered me a time and I took it. When I hung up, I stood up in my office, my whole body shaking. Twice, I sat down to resume my legal research, and both times I popped out of my seat 30 seconds later to pace. My mind insisted that making a doctor's appointment was no big deal, but the adrenaline coursing through me hinted otherwise. That night I wrote in my journal. I got off the phone and burst into tears. I felt like I said the wrong stuff and he doesn't like me, and I felt exposed and vulnerable. I didn't care if he could help me. I cared about whether or not he liked me. The waiting room consisted of bland doctor's office fare, an Easter lily, a grayscale photograph of a man stretching his arms outward and turning his face toward the sun. The bookshelf held titles like Codependent No More and Vandalized Love Maps, and dozens of AA newsletters. Next to the inner door, there were 2 buttons, one labeled Group and one labeled Dr. Rosen. I pressed the Dr. Rosen button to announce myself and then settled in a chair along the wall facing the door. To calm my nerves, I grabbed the National Geographic and flipped through pictures of the majestic Arctic sea wolf galloping across a treeless plain. On the phone, Dr. Rosen had sounded serious. I heard East Coast vowels. I heard an unsmiling gravitas. I heard a stern, humorless priest. Part of me had hoped he'd be too booked to see me for a few weeks or months, but he offered an appointment 48 hours later. The waiting room door swung open at exactly 1:30. A slight middle-aged man in a red Tommy Hilfiger golf shirt, khaki pants, and black leather loafers opened the door. His face wore a tight smile, friendly but professional, and what was left of his wiry, grayish hair stuck up all over his head, slightly reminiscent of Einstein. If I passed him on the street, I would never look twice. From a quick glance, I could tell he was too young to be my dad and too old to want to fuck, which seemed ideal. I followed him down the hall to an office where northern windows looked over the multi-story Marshall Fields building. There were several patient seating options: a scratchy-looking upholstered couch, an upright office chair, or a black oversized armchair next to a desk. I chose the black armchair. A slew of framed Harvard diplomas drew my eye. I respected the Harvard thing. I'd had Ivy League dreams, but state school finances and test scores. To me, those Ivy League certificates signified that this guy was top tier, elite, creme de la creme. But it also meant that if he couldn't help me, then I was truly and deeply fucked. I'll stop there.
Beautiful.
Thank
Love
you.
hearing it. It's been a while since I've been inside your material, and I'm remembering how many times I laughed and also went, from anxiousness, solidarity, or something like that.
Yes, I hope that's all in there.
So I feel like we should talk about something large that happened to you today first, so I don't have to hold it in the whole time, because that's just too hard. I think someone today selected you to be in their book club, and I think you should tell people who that is.
Yeah, I've had the very, very good fortune of being informed that Reese Witherspoon has chosen group as her book club pick, which is amazing. Everybody knows Reese Witherspoon and her platform. She's really dedicated her platform to amplifying women's stories and women's voices. And the fact that she's chosen group is a thrill, and it's unbelievable. And I'm still digesting. But it's a wonderful thing. And it's like group will reach so many more people, obviously, with Reese's platform than I could ever on my own.
It's so exciting. I'm so thrilled for you. And I love the picture of her holding it. So y'all look online if you haven't seen it yet. It's just gorgeous and exciting for all of us who love Christie. And so this is a book that people can plug into and relate to and find solace and find solidarity and, find themselves inside it. So the fact that she might open it up to more humans is actually phenomenal, not just for like sales and fame and awesomeness, but because it'll help so many people feel less alone. And so that's another reason I'm just super excited about that piece of it. But, hell to the S, Reese Witherspoon. That's just amazing.
I feel the same way, to the extent that when I was living through the events in the book, I was so alone. I had the idea that recovery, I should have already been recovered. It should take no more than 6 months. And I was really lonely, and I couldn't see my story in other books and in other literature. And so if someone can find a piece of themselves in this, someone who's lost or feels stuck or thinks, well, I already do all the right things and I don't feel any better, what's wrong with me? I would like the message of hope, and not even hope is so overblown, but even just company. Like, you're
company,
not the only person who's been. I was in a trench for a very long time.
I love that you just use that word, because even reading it, what it feels like to me is good company from people who aren't going to lie to me, and they're going to say when they're beyond anxious on the meter, and they're going to talk about what it feels like to feel like you're inside out. But let me go back to this idea of recovery and One of the many things I love about your story and the book is that it kind of complicates. I mean, hopefully this will resonate with you. It kind of complicates what we think we mean when we say words like healing and words like catharsis and recovery. It's as if you pull it apart a little bit so that we can linger inside words like healing and ask, well, what if it's not the end goal? What if it's a lived process that you have to step up to and be in relationship with? That's how it feels when I'm reading it. Do you know what I mean? So can you just talk a little bit about words like that we've been trained to understand, like healing or recovery, or, like, okay, I'm done.
Right. If somebody today offered me the choice between healing and company, I would choose company over healing. And I think that what tripped me up for so long, even before when I started therapy, I'd already been in a 12-step program for many years. I can't remember the math, like it was multiple years. And I had the idea, it was so burdensome. The idea of healing felt like an all togetherness. To me, the way that I had heard it constructed was you no longer have the issue you used to have, and your job is to carry the message. That's a big thing in 12-step program. And
Yeah.
nobody told me to mishear it, but the fact of the matter is the way it landed in my body was I was supposed to be well and to not falter. And nobody described to me the way I view recovery today is really I only have today, and it doesn't matter how long I've been sober, how long I've been clean with food, or what I even did at breakfast. Like I really only have this moment. And do I have the ability to connect with someone? And early on, or maybe not early on, like maybe midway through the events in the book, I happened to Google my therapist in the book, and I saw him. I can't remember now if it was the transcript of a speech. I believe it was the transcript of a speech he did. And he was talking about recovery. And he said, the addict in recovery is no different than the addict who is using, which I'm like, that's not true. Then what are all those meetings for? What's that coin for? What's the sponsor for? He said the difference is the addict in recovery will relapse 1,000 times a day, but the addict in recovery will try again. Essentially, it was something like that. And I just remember thinking that's so much more helpful to me to get up and live in the world, because I can tell you, I have failed a dozen times today. And this should be one of the greatest days of my life. And I still missed connection. I still miss vulnerability. And if I've defined these things in a way that seeks perfection and a kind of loneliness, I don't want any part of it.
That is so fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that if you had to choose between healing and company, you'd pick company. That made me tear up and all the hairs on my arm go up. I got to go think about that. That's beautiful. I think I know what you mean. That brings me toward a question. Do you want to talk just for a second about the difference between this group that you were in and other groups? Because it really is profoundly different kind of group.
Yeah, I laugh now because now the book is sort of getting out in the world, and I've talked to some therapists who have read the book, who got early copies, or they run podcasts and they wanted to talk to me. And all of the therapists are very, very nervous about this group that I'm still in it, but they're very nervous about it. And there's several principles that are at play that are considered very unorthodox. And one of the chief ones is, well, the one that I love the most is that there's not a rule that the members of the group contain all of their interactions within the group. The way that I've heard from other therapists is they often, when you start a group, maybe you get a contract that says everything here will be confidential. We don't do that. And then any interaction between the group mates will happen in the group. And we also don't do that, what that means is outside of group, I will go to dinner. I went to Russia with one of my group mates. And we are really encouraged to break our lives open and to blend and to not be alone and to call and to spend holidays with each other as a way to make the group work part of real life. It's not
Yeah.
just in the confines of a session. And then the notion of confidentiality is another one that people are deeply, deeply nervous about. And the way that it has worked is the doctor, Dr. Rosen, he has ethical duty to keep everybody's confidences. So that's inviolate. However, whenever I go to therapy, there's 6 other people sitting there, and confidentiality and privacy is not imposed on them. And in my very first session, there was a guy in my group talking about a woman in another group. And I was like, whoa, whoa. It just felt like gossip. Like, to me, it was like naughty, naughty. Like, first of all, it seems like gossip. And second of all, why are you talking about another woman? And I came from a very buttoned up sort of tradition. And the way that I understood it and what I bought into was the notion that holding secrets, big or small, the secret is, I know someone who murdered someone, or the secret is someone I know at work skims from the till, whatever the secret is, if I hold that for another person, I'm going to be eaten, I'm going to hold the shame of it.
Yeah.
And so the notion, the group principle is, this is a place to come where everything is speakable. And that is the beginning of healing for those of us who are burdened by and addicted to secret keeping to protect people, or just to hold on to shame. Like, there's lots of reasons to hold on to shame. Why? How does it work? How can you be free? And these were the tools given to me on my very first day. And I sort of, I buy it. Like, I'm all in.
I love listening to you talk about it. It's also a way to disperse it and make it less precious and privatize that we're against each other in secret and private ways. Our good friend Wayne has a question that really dovetails with what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So here's the question. Group therapy is so much about authentic, really fearless exposure to other people within the group, like you were talking about. So is writing a memoir? I'm wondering how being in the group prepared you for the wider exposure that the memoir is bringing to your life, and in what ways hasn't it?
That's a great question, Wayne. In many ways, it has prepared me, because that feeling, those first few months when I sat in that fishbowl and I had to go back to that space to write the book, I felt like, wait a minute, if I come to group and tell you about when I had pinworm in kindergarten, or what happened to my body at any point along the way, then some dude in the Monday group is going to know what kind of sex I had or what kind of parasites I had. That felt like I felt a flame in my body. Like, that's the shame, right? And that's how I felt last night when I thought Joe from accounting in my office might read my book. I should be so lucky, right, to have Joe spend his money on my book, but it's also like, I'll pass him in the hall and he'll know things about my sex life. I don't know if he knows, but he could, because I put him out to the world. And then what does that do to our what is information, uneven information, do to relationships in the world? And because I've made a commitment to share stories, because I believe in stories, especially stories about the body, I don't have to be in shame about Joe. And the other thing that I have learned more in this process is to add to the mix of no secrets is also have boundaries. Like, I have written a book and everything in there is fair game, and I'm a very open person, but I also do get to bring in some of the other work we've done where I can cut off a conversation, or I can change the subject, or I can say, I'm not available to go there, but here's this. So I've never really done that, but I guess theoretically I could.
Yeah. I've heard you in the time we've been doing this more than once talk about the body, how something lands in your body, and you said it's important for you to tell stories, especially about the body. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you to a place where you would say stuff like that and you would want to be writing, bodies, because not everybody would. So
Yeah,
what's that about?
that's a great question. And I think there's two parts to that answer, but I feel like all the writing that I love comes from a body. And when I started to really get serious about my writing, I saw that what really moved me and changed me in the books I went back to told stories about the body. And, I looked at some of my early writing and it was all in my head. It was all,
I remember.
I remember I actually went to a retreat in Portland. I live in Chicago. I flew to Portland. Lydia was there. And the directions when we were workshopping my piece were circle all the places where Christie talks about her body, and everybody's pages were blank. Like I thought the purpose of being on the page was to be witty and clever and keep things moving. And I didn't know how to linger. And what I learned about writing body stories was, first of all, that's where the juice, I was able to tap into the juice. What's unique about my story were the body parts, like binging on apples at night. I had that in original versions of the book. It was like maybe a paragraph, and it was in actually one of your workshops where you and Zen said, whoa, whoa, we need to see this. And I thought, when I got it down on paper, that's a moment where the writing process mirrored the group process, because
Right.
being specific, the reason why people, or the adage in both therapy and in writing, is be specific, give us the details, what's the texture of it, it's because that's a better story. And that's where I found what it felt like power. It felt like power, which I in my mind, power is releasing of shame.
Got you. Got you. And storytelling opens the experience up to other people. The more specific you get to your particulars, the more other people resonate and vibrate with story. There are some other questions coming up. I promised peoples to get to them. I want to ask one other quick thing at least. So I found your book from the get-go hilarious. It's really funny.
Thank you.
Like laugh out loud, piddle a little bit funny, all over the place. Not every line, but so is using humor on the page important to you, or does it just come out that way and whatever? Or like, what's your relationship to humor?
I think that it's very, very important to me. In part, again, this is like so weird. I don't think I put this all together till this conversation. I could not have done all those years of therapy, and I wouldn't have stayed if we didn't spend like a good portion of many sessions like laughing. Like what, with inside jokes or laughing at ourselves and laughing. That laughter really is a way to leaven the darkness that we're all grappling with. And so I find it very, very, very important, and it's a value of mine. What I find on the page is, if it comes out naturally, it seems to be the right place. However, I have definitely used humor to dodge telling a truer story. And I've used humor to be clever, to show off in a way that comes across as, I think, off-putting, or it's just distancing. Humor can be distancing if it's hiding something deeper, or if I'm just putting a joke on the end because it's to blunt the intimacy. So I do
Yeah,
that on the page, and I do it in group.
that's a good way to put it. That's an amazing thing you know about yourself. I think most people pretend they don't know that.
Well, it helped. I got a lot of feedback when I originally, 2 years ago, or maybe three now, I had a draft and I was like, oh, it's ready to go. And I got a lot of feedback. This is wickedly funny, but very superficial. And I was like, oh, it was feedback that I knew was true, which is why it was, it hurts to get that kind of thing, but I'm like, oh, that's true. And so I had to figure out where the jokes were beards for a deeper, truer story.
I'm going to compile a kind of question, because it's coming up in more than one way. Several people want to know, what are the reactions to people in your group, or people you've written about? And so they're asking it in more than one way, but basically that's what they want to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the way that I approached this, originally, this was not going to be a real book. In my mind, I was going to be a novelist, and I didn't know how to do that because I couldn't find a story. And then this story, I could see it, and I had energy for it. So I thought, I'm going to practice on this thing and learn like how to hit the beats or learn how to write, and then I'll go write a novel about this. And then I just stayed here. And so once I started taking the book more seriously as its own thing that might go in the world, I sent electronic drafts to all my group mates and my therapist. Nobody read it. And that's fine, but I just wanted them to know what I was up to. And I never used their real names. But then when things got more serious and it was starting to look like it might go into the world, I sent them electronic copies again, and we were talking about it all along. And those were some painful sessions because there's 6 different people who I still am in group with, and they're all carrying different messages. Some people felt like were concerned I would exploit them. Some people were afraid that in conjunction with that I would tell their stories and not my own. And some have really good stories, and I really did want to steal them, but that I did a whole draft where I took out everything that I was stealing, to make the book better. That had to go. And some people were amused, some people were cheerleading. So there was like a wide variety of reactions, but I had to grapple with the ethics of this from the very beginning. And right, maybe about a year ago, we got a new member in the group. So she's not in the book. These events were earlier. And she said, I heard there's someone in this group who's writing a book. I don't want to be in any book. I think that's unethical, which is a totally fair position. People don't come to therapy to be written about. And so that's why I shared the drafts all along. And I had previous group members, I sent them drafts as well. I couldn't find all of the people. And then what I did to, everybody's disguised, of course. But another thing I did is I asked Dr. Rosen, I was like, can you please read this with an eye towards taking care of all your patients, including me? But if you think I've stepped over a line, or just help me be sure my ethics are in the right place before this goes out into the world. So there's all that's sort of been negotiated in all the different relationships. And I have one group member who's like, I'm never going to read this. I don't want to read this. I want to have a relationship with you without the book in the middle. And I totally respect however they want to handle it is totally, they have my blessing. I don't need my group mates to read my book. They've done enough for me. They don't have to do that too.
There's another side to all this that someone is mentioning, which is Dr. Rosen might need to be worried about having a tidal wave of new group clients because of your book. And nobody ever thinks of that, but it's been my experience that sometimes in nonfiction, people are bummed out when you don't include them because they think
yes,
they're trying to make it. So there's a whole other side to this exact question. I want to ask you about a funny story you told right before we came on that reminds me of how much I love you, about your experience of having to have some photos made, like author photos or photo shoots for this new thing that's happening.
Yeah.
What's your experience of that?
I told my husband, like at first it sounds vaguely exciting, like, oh, the blah blah magazine. I won't be vague. The London Telegraph wanted to run something about the book because it's released in London today as well. And they said, oh, we want to get another picture besides your headshot. And my first thought is like, ooh, free pictures. That lasted like 10 seconds. Then it was like, what am I going to wear? What kind of makeup? When is this happening? And then instantly I was like, body shame, just like, ooh, you don't know what COVID has done, and that's really just an excuse, because even if this was not COVID times, that kind of body exposure makes me really, really uncomfortable. I still have body dysmorphia and I always will. So when the photographer, it's getting closer and closer, thank God I only had like a day's notice. So it's not like I had a long lead up. I was like such a bitch to my family. And then I had a little thing with the photographer, like a little power struggle, which was just born of my own shame. It was born of my own shame. And she couldn't be nicer. She comes in, she's like, it's very technical and tedious. And she's setting all these things up. And I'm just sitting there getting fatter and fat and feeling fatter and fatter. And she looked at me and she's like, they're taking pictures. And then she could see on the laptop, and my boobs looked like they were like on stacked, wrong, like not, they were vertical instead of horizontal. It was like, ah! And she's like, let me get a clamp. I'm like, what are you going to do with the clamp? But anyway, my sense of, I just kept saying, like, my husband would come down and look at me like, are you okay? And I'd be like, no.
Help me.
And it's like, it was easier to write a book than to do a 2-hour photo thing, which is people who have a body thing, face thing. I mean, it was like, now it's like, there's so many ways to pick myself apart, and I'm not proud. I don't think it's cute that I do, but the truth is, it's like, what about my hair? What about my skin? What about my clothes? What about my body? I don't look cool. There's nothing cool. Like, I don't look like a New York lawyer. Like, I mean, I don't know I don't know what my image is supposed to be. And it was actually so painful. It was the most painful thing poor me. I sound like I'm complaining about the yacht, but like, this has all been joyful and fun and a celebration of hard work and all the people who've loved me, writing side and therapy side and family side. But the picture thing, no bueno.
It's hard for you. Yeah. Somebody wanted to know earlier in the conversation why you went to therapy in the first place. And it taps into why this might be particularly difficult for you, the photo stuff.
Oh, for sure. What the inciting incidents for therapy was, I had gone to law school. I'd finished my first year of law school and I'd done really well. And I, of course, like many women, when I started, I was like, oh, I hope I'm in the top half. And I finished the first year and I'd done really, really well. And I was surprised, but I wasn't happy because I knew what I'd done, which was I picked law because I didn't have personal relationships. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to be close to people. I didn't know how, like, girlfriends from college would call and I wouldn't answer the phone. I wouldn't call them back. And I was really, really isolated. And I thought, well, if I'm a lawyer, then at least I can have I can have a mystique, I can have money, I can have a career that will soak up all the blank spaces of my life. Because I knew all my romantic relationships were very fraught and each one was worse than the last. And I knew I couldn't fix it because I'd been trying, and I'm in this 12-step program and my food's still really funky. And I knew, as smart as I could be on a law school exam, I couldn't fix what was wrong with me around connecting with people. And I needed like a big, big power soaking, and I'd gone to like individual therapy and I just like eke out a little bit of truth, but it wasn't. Well, first of all, I didn't tell the truth. That was a problem. And then secondly, I didn't stick with it because I thought, well, if I'm not well in 8 sessions, then you can't help me. So I had a lot going on. And I just knew what I thought was, well, I was suicidal. I was having suicidal ideation. And I thought, well, I'm going to be in a profession. I'm going to work, do great. And then I'm going to die. And I was like, I just want to die. Let's skip the work part,
Heard. And a couple people in the question area identify with exactly the storyline you just talked about. More than one person, including Lisa and Rima, who's a friend of ours, have asked questions about the material in the book and your family, or writing memoir and navigating the tricky territory of family. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it doesn't, as real as it seemed to me, dealing with those issues, it doesn't feel as real as when there's a book about to go out into the world. Like, I thought I'd done my work, and then it was really scary to, in some ways it's like, well, I don't care about a stranger in Akron who reads all about me, who cares? But what does my mother think? What does my brother think? Really, I was on a panel last November at the Loft in Minneapolis, and someone talked about, there's a book called Will They Still Love Me? That memoirists have weighed in on. That's the question, right? That a memoirist may ask if they go places. And what I did to guide myself, or just to, first of all, it was totally, totally scary because I don't know, I don't have a clear sense of what I'm allowed to tell. I still don't have a clear sense of that. So I really just steered towards things that I feel like, well, that happened to me. I remember that. That seems like fair game, but there's still a great deal of a feeling of like, I bet there's people who wish I hadn't gone there. And I've had to make peace with that. And sometimes the old idea, the old regime under which I used to live, where you just don't tell people your business, sometimes that overtakes me. And I think, oh my God, I'm so tacky. I'm so abusive to other people. Like, those are the worst of the voices, right? And I guess I just say this to anybody who writes nonfiction, that there are ghosts of the past that tell me it's not classy, it's navel gazing. There's the nobody cares. The nobody cares thing doesn't bother me as much as like the notion I actively hurt someone else.
Right.
That's that to me, when I think of that, I could not have done this without a writing group that was also in the arena doing this work and figuring out. And there were things in there were things in earlier drafts that I just thought, I can't live with it. I'm not ready for that yet. And
Yeah.
it was, I took it out, and it turns out it was fine. And I did have a family member who asked me, I called to tell this family member I had a book deal. Yay. And then the family member said, please keep me out of your book. And I was like, okay. And so that was really stressful for me, in part because I didn't do the work of like having a conversation, like, what do you mean by that? I just said okay and hung up. Which is like, I didn't know I had other choices. Later I talked to other writers who were like, you didn't have to agree to that. And then I ended up you know, abiding by that, and the work didn't suffer, but I still have some pangs about the ways in which I sold my work away to keep a promise in a relationship. There's more there.
Yeah,
So
it's tricky. It's tricky for anyone writing nonfiction in this question area. Let me go to a piece of what you were talking about that has to do with the pressure to keep secrets and the pressure not to spill family or community secrets. Can we talk for a second about Texas? The first thing I want to know is, do you think Texas will turn blue?
I do.
Oh my God, I've waited my whole life. It would be astonishing to me if that happened.
I don't want to be a dumb white lady with hope that doesn't actually know what's going on, but I have sources in the Democratic Party in Dallas, which is super red, that believe we're going to be blue. So
Okay, that's my first question. And I hope they're right. I will do a special dance if that happens. I have lots of connections to Texas myself.
yes.
But growing up in Texas, partially, was that part of where the message came, to keep the secret, hold it in, be good, be proper, be pretty, be those things?
Yes, I do. Yeah, yes, no question about it. I think it's in the air that this notion of little girls are, I always felt like there was something wrong with me because I cried and I emoted, and I just was oozing with like appetite. And I mean, I started binging in second grade, so I already had this idea, and it was actual, that there were a lot parts of me were out of control.
Yeah, it's big in the book. I love those parts of the book.
Yeah, just very not contained, therefore not girl. There was many ways in which I saw my emotional life as outside of proper girl. And in Texas, proper girl is the only kind of girl that seemed appropriate. And add on to that, there were also a lot, I grew up in a very Catholic community. And so
Yeah.
then on top of that, you've got this sense of like the Virgin Mary. I used to, in second grade, I prayed for the stigmata, which should have been a clue. It seems like it's a cry for help. I really wanted to be self-denying and pure. Those were the words that I associated with successful femininity.
You're right.
Self-denying and pure and no needs and beatific. And I just, whenever I veered out of that, which was often and early, I couldn't make sense of, so what am I? And how do I become something here? And it's maybe that's why I had to leave Texas, to find a place to be bigger and expand the definition of girl and feminine and then woman.
I think it's worth thinking through. I love how your story and your book approaches that. And Catholicism is a similar kind of question for you. And even the stigmata is a form of punishing oneself to reach this realm that you're talking about. I have to tell you a quick funny story. When Miles went back to U of O just this fall, I was terrified. I still am. And I didn't do well with it, like I never do when he goes anywhere to do anything. And the first week he was there, he was opening a package of a 6-pack of deodorant with a knife, and he stabbed himself right there.
Oh, yes.
And so then I immediately contacted him. I'm like, do you know what stigmata is? He's like, back the F off. Chill out. It's just a cut. It's fine. But I was completely, having been raised Catholic and having a mother from Texas, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's beautifully rendered in the book.
Thank you.
There's more than one question about writing process. One side of it is a few people want to know, how'd you go from these are intense feelings I have experiences to I'm telling stories to I'm going to write a book. And then another piece that Sarah, I see, has just asked about is kind of about, did you open up stuff you thought you'd made peace with and have to take a step back at any point in the storytelling? Like you thought you were over that, you thought you're past that, but the act of writing may have opened stuff up. So they're two different questions, but they're both about process.
Sure. I think that so I'd written 2 novels, and they were so unreadable and so terrible. So the one that led to Group was, it was about a young lawyer who was very hard charging and had no relationships. And she ended up representing her therapist. And then I'm like, I didn't know how to do a novel. So I'm like, and this happened, and this happened. And then at the end, I wanted to wrap it up. I was about it, 60,000 words. So I just had them have sex. And then I took it, I was talking about, my writing, my novel. And Dr. Rosen said, bring it in. And I told them I didn't know how to end it. So I just have them have sex. And he's like, bring it in to Group. And I want you to read that scene. So everyone is sitting there. It's clearly about me and the therapist. And I'm now reading it and everyone's like, ew, that's disgusting. And I thought so too, once I read it out loud. And so then I was like so horrified about this. There was something about that it was so, the problem with it is it wasn't true. It didn't ring true. You wouldn't, unless you're Carson McCullers, you're not going to have sex with your therapist, most likely. And so I was like, well, what's the true story isn't a novel, which is like a dumb realization. But then I started thinking, well, the real story is I did a thing that changed my life, and I know that in my bones. And how do I story that? And around that time, Cheryl Strayed's Wild came out, and I might have started writing a few scenes. And I read it, and I was like, well, it's what I did was like climbing the Pacific Trail, except I just went to therapy 1,000 billion times. And then I could almost see the arc. And so then I just started writing into the arc. And, early versions were more like, how did I find love? And then I realized, what's the story under that is, how did I become a person who could be in loving relationships, not even just with my husband? And I think that there's still the ghost of a like love story in there, but really it was about, how do I have a friend? How do I be a friend? And wait, I can't remember, what's the second part of the question?
Oh,
Writing?
you've kind of answered both of them pretty well just by kind of storying it. But another one related to it is, how could you tell somebody else how to not be satisfied with like the layer where you just got it on the page, you're like, I did it, I got it, I told it, okay, I'm done. Like, how do you
Yeah.
talk to them about going into what might be underneath that?
That's a great question. And I guess I have a three-part answer. One is, if you think you're done, even if you think you're bullshitting yourself, try to send it out in the world and see what feedback comes back. If you are a person motivated by rejection or, market forces telling you the door's not open yet, the truth is that really motivates me. That's valid as anything else. It doesn't feel great. Another thing is, I was about to say therapy group. Get into a writing group where people are doing the hard work and they're gonna push you. Like, they're going to not just sign off on it. And my writing group is women across the country, and we meet on the telephone. And I met them actually through classes at Lydia's workshop. And they'll say to me, I can tell in the first breath, they're like, I love your writing, Christie. I love it. But I'm just like, it's coming. But it's like, there's something about the practice. If that you have, for me, I've had to practice getting it wrong. And I had to also, what has helped is like celebrate like those first drafts that are superficial or imperfect, or where you're still avoiding a whole true part of the story that needs to be there, that's actually maybe the heart of it. You still get to celebrate the draft you wrote. And I found that I'm starting to be a person who is more motivated by gentleness and a celebratory energy, instead of just the whip all the time. With the whip, it doesn't always have to be the whip. It's like, great, we have this to work with. What's one place you're dodging? Because you know.
I love listening to you.
I stole all my ideas from you, so.
I love you and I miss you. Another friend of ours, Tanya, wants to know, I know. So Tanya writes, group is such a personal, vulnerable investigation. What are you working on next?
That's mean. Well, that's so funny Tanya asked that question. She actually recommended a book to me called Cinderella and Her Sisters, which I ordered and it came twice. And that book is research, because I think I want to write about my relationships with women. And really, I'm a very jealous person, and that's been that's somebody maybe Sarah asked about what did I uncover during this process. And one of the things that I feel like didn't fit in group, just based on the architecture that I could visualize, what didn't fit in there is some of my shenanigans with women. So I really focused on men. But I did equally sabotaging and just I had bad habits in my relationships with women. And I don't even mean sexual. I think that there's a lot of forces that keep women apart.
Yeah.
And I was susceptible to every single one of them. And I have a real heartbreak about relationships and opportunities I missed with other women. And I'd like to write into that.
I love that book too. I've seen pieces of that story you're building. And I love this phrase, shenanigans between women. I think we don't talk about it or look at it or care about it enough to change the story. So I'm really glad you're writing about that. We're winding down a little bit. There's a few people wanting to know about, are you still a lawyer, and how do you write and do all the other things and stuff like that?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm like, I think I'm still a lawyer. Yes, I have a day job. I took the week off so that I don't have to try to hold two heads at one time. And I don't, when I look back at the past couple years when I was writing group, and I have a full-time job. Luckily, it's very flexible. There's a lot of, I'm a practicing lawyer, but I work for an organization that is not in private practice. So I can get up and do work in the morning, and it's one of those things where you look back, you're like, I'm not sure how that happened. I've been very aggressive about protecting my writing time, in part because my day job helps my kids get braces and it keeps the lights on, but it doesn't feed my artists. It doesn't feed me in the way that the writing does, but I need both. And so that tension has worked. When I got my when I ended up, it became clear that group was going to be a book, and it was going to go out into the world. We were celebrating, and my husband's super excited, and he was like, well, you still have to do your day, like, your day job is part of how you did this, is part of the special sauce. Like, don't get any ideas. And it's like, I'm not in a position to quit my day job, but and I guess what I would say, I always ask questions like that when I would go see authors too. It's like, I had the idea that if you really cared, if you're really a writer, you'd give it 5 hours a day uninterrupted in your garret, like Norman Mailer. And the truth is, I wrote this book in 2-hour increments. And I'm not even talking two at one time, like an hour in the morning, get the kids, do the job, lunchtime, and then sneak an hour before soccer for the kids.
Yes.
Like,
say it out loud.
That's how it happened. And I am not in a position to not work. I have children I want to see. There's obviously, everybody's busy, but I don't have an MFA. I took classes through Lydia and other like local grassroots situations. And I want to be very clear about that. The longest stretch I've ever written in my life is 4 hours. And it was one time in the past 7 years. And that's like twice as much as I ever did. And I haven't done it since.
Thank you for saying all of that out loud. People have weird ideas in their head about what it means to be a writer. So thank you for saying all of it out loud. We have just a few other minutes left, unfortunately, because I would sit here with you all night. Are there other books about therapy or bodies or, telling your thing that you've liked?
Oh my God, yes. Without them, there's no group. I really, when someone asks me about the therapy question, I think Lori Gottlieb's book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, really, without her, there's no group. I feel that in my bones. I was mostly done drafting by the time I read her book, but the way that it resonated inside of me, and it just gave me the boost of like, oh, this is a conversation we should be having about take us in. One time I was somewhere in a workshop and somebody said, well, I'm not going to take y'all to my therapy sessions on the page. And I was like, oh God, that's like all I do on the page. And so it's sort of like that's more company, right? And I would say the books that I keep returning to that really nail the body, Kiesi Lehman's Heavy. I'm reading that like every 6 months, talking about the body and the impact of American racist toxicity on the body. Like I can't get enough of that. And I just read an incredible book, Molly Weisenberg's The Fixed Stars. And I have a complicated relationship to the word brave, but the gift in her book is she's telling us a very personal story about desire and her body and how it changed. And I just find that book to be so generous. And one more is, I just also reread Carmen Maria Machado's In the Dream House. She writes so beautifully about her body and what she put it through and her own collusion and then in her own abuse, but also acknowledging that abuse is a real thing. and that, I mean, she didn't really collude in her abuse, but like the ways in which she couldn't recognize what staying means in a relationship, happened to be an abusive lesbian relationship. That the writing and the story are both so beautiful and so they just left such a mark on me. These are the ones I keep returning to.
Beautiful. That, what a great reading list that would be. Like, you could just read those books this year and be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a great reading list. How do you would you call your book brave?
Ooh. There's something I feel about, like, when it depends on who says it. This is what I've discovered. If a if a writer says to me, "Oh, that's so brave," well, there's something about the quality of it. If somebody says it to me, sometimes I feel like there's a transmission of shame. Like, "You're so brave. Don't you know that women aren't supposed to tell stories like that?"
Like a cover story, yeah.
Yeah, there's a sense of like, it's brave because I didn't know what you were talking about. Like, I'd never heard of anything like that. But if somebody, like, I zoomed into like a book club group that was young women, and they were like, "You're so brave." And then they shared with me, it was like an entryway instead of like a barrier, like, "You're brave and you're
Heard.
over there."
Right.
They were like, "You're brave, and I too sleep in my bra for reasons I don't understand."
That's beautiful.
So it depends
That's a
on,
better definition of brave. I love it.
yeah, like, if you're brave, if you're saying you're brave, I connect with you, I will join you, or I'm scared to join you. That's another one. But like, just like, "You're way over there with your crazy therapy and your weird worms and your apples." It feels like we're kind of transmitting shame, but that's not always the case.
That's worth thinking about. I hear what you're saying. Here's a good one to end on. Karen Killian wants to know, what are you going to do to celebrate?
That is such a good question. Such a good question, because I've been saying all along, celebrate the little victories, celebrate the little victories.
It's your turn.
It's like,
Reese Witherspoon, my God.
I know. My husband and my children have prepared like a virtual party, and because it's virtual, people from all different spots are gonna Zoom in, and my kids are gonna MC some kind of like question and answer. Anyway, it's supposed to be a party. You're supposed to bring dessert, and I think someone has procured a cake, and I feel like that is like celebrating with people and pausing to just breathe and take in the love and support. Feels like such a celebration. And then maybe sleep in tomorrow.
Woo!
Sleep.
But that celebration you just described is company.
Yeah.
That's where we started the conversation. That it would be meaningful to you to be in that good company is really beautiful. Oh, I got another tear.
Me too. Me
I
too.
knew I'd be crying. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I feel lucky to have people to celebrate with. That's what the story is. That's what the story gave me. And now the book just gets to multiply that. And so that's a blessing.
Yes, it is. Well, we've reached our 4:00 time, and so I don't know how we magically end this, but I know someone who does know.
It's me. Thank you guys both so much for doing this. Christie, I said this to you in the green room, but I really hope and I think that this book will not only destigmatize therapy, but also encourage people who have been thinking about going to therapy, especially in a time that right now we're all stressed and we're all dealing with emotions that we are not prepared for, and that it's okay to ask for help, and that it can help. So thank you for writing this.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting us, and thanks everybody for spending your evening with us.
Yeah, I've dropped the link in the chat for both Lidia and Christie's books. But everyone, thank you so much for coming. Stay well and stay well read, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.